The morning sun spilled through the high windows of the Riverdale County Courthouse, casting long streaks of light across the polished floors. Federal Prosecutor Marcus Ellison walked through those halls like a man carrying the weight of two worlds, the law he'd sworn to uphold, and the truth he was about to defend against it. He'd spent over a decade fighting corruption, but today's battle felt different. The defendant wasn't a criminal, not in the traditional sense. It was the system itself. Across the courtroom sat Judge Harold Gaines, a man whose reputation for arrogance and favoritism was whispered through every legal corridor in the state. Marcus had seen this man bend justice before: quiet deals, selective rulings, the kind of moral decay that hides behind robes and polished gavels. But this time, Marcus had proof. He wasn't just prosecuting a case. He was walking into a storm that could destroy his career or cleanse the court once and for all. The spectators settled. The hum of murmurs died down, and when the bailiff called the session to order, Marcus took a slow breath. He wasn't here to win. He was here to reveal. Judge Gaines leaned back in his chair with an expression that carried decades of untouchable authority. "Mr. Ellison," he said dryly, "you may proceed." His tone wasn't an invitation, it was a challenge. Marcus approached the lectern, placing his file on the wood with steady hands. "Your Honor," he began, "before we continue with the case of State versus Daniels, I'd like to motion for the court's attention to procedural misconduct within this courtroom." The words landed like stones in water. The crowd shifted. Gaines' eyes narrowed. "Are you implying misconduct by this bench?" Marcus didn't flinch. "I'm not implying it, Your Honor, I'm stating it." Gasps rippled through the room. Everyone knew this wasn't just bold, it was career suicide. "You're out of line," Gaines barked. Marcus met his gaze with calm defiance. "If demanding fairness is out of line, then maybe the line's been drawn in the wrong place." The courtroom fell silent. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Gaines' face turned red. "Proceed carefully, counselor," he warned. But Marcus had already crossed that threshold. He wasn't backing down, not today. The case continued, but the tension had shifted. Marcus laid out evidence that seemed ordinary at first: minor procedural lapses, irregular signatures, courtroom transcripts. But then came the moment no one saw coming. He produced a sealed document from the Department of Justice, a report showing that Judge Gaines had deliberately suppressed evidence in 3 previous trials, all favoring wealthy defendants with political ties. The room erupted in disbelief. Gaines slammed his gavel, shouting for order. "You're treading on dangerous ground, Mr. Ellison." Marcus's voice didn't rise, it deepened. "The dangerous ground, Your Honor, is the one you've been standing on while calling it justice." His words cut through the chaos like a blade. Cameras from the press clicked rapidly. The courtroom, once an echo of power, now felt like a stage where truth had finally found its audience. Gaines demanded a recess, but Marcus refused. "No recess," he said firmly. "The public deserves to hear this." For the first time, the mighty Judge Gaines looked cornered, not by another politician, not by another lawyer, but by the truth he'd long buried. After court adjourned that day, Marcus sat alone in his office, staring at the blinds as streaks of sunlight cut through the dust. He knew the fallout was coming: suspension, investigation, maybe disbarment. Exposing a judge wasn't bravery in the legal world, it was betrayal. But what haunted him more than fear was silence, the kind that follows truth before it becomes change. Within hours, headlines flooded national networks. Federal prosecutor challenges judge for corruption. Some called him a hero, others called him reckless. His phone buzzed endlessly, reporters, colleagues, even old friends who suddenly remembered his number. Yet one call stood out from U.S. Attorney Rachel Foster, his mentor and one of the most respected legal minds in Washington. Her voice was sharp but steady. "Marcus, what you did was dangerous," she said. "But it was also necessary. I'm assigning you protection and a platform." That single sentence turned the tide. The DOJ launched an internal inquiry into judicial ethics, and for the first time, the system began looking inward. Marcus had shaken the very walls of justice, and they were finally beginning to crack. Weeks passed, and Marcus became both a symbol and a target. Protesters gathered outside courthouses across the state, demanding accountability. Meanwhile, Judge Gaines went on the defensive, issuing televised statements, calling Marcus a disgruntled bureaucrat seeking attention. But truth has a way of surviving noise. The Department of Justice confirmed everything: forged documents, bribe, intermediaries, and a trail of corruption that reached far beyond one courtroom. The state convened an emergency ethics committee. When Marcus took the stand to testify, his voice didn't waver once. "The law is not a weapon for the powerful," he said. "It's a shield for the people, but when that shield is cracked, it cuts those it was meant to protect." Those words would later be quoted in law schools, articles, and courtrooms across the country. And when the committee delivered its decision, lifetime disbarment for Judge Gaines and two others, the country watched a new precedent unfold. Justice wasn't restored overnight, but something had shifted. People had seen behind the curtain, and once you see, you can't unsee. Despite his victory, Marcus didn't celebrate. He'd lost colleagues, faced threats, and spent months under federal review himself. But he also gained something far more powerful: integrity untouched by fear. Late one evening, he returned to that same courtroom, now empty and echoing. The nameplate on the judge's bench had been removed, the air heavy with quiet history. He stood there in the stillness, replaying the moment he'd first defied the system. "You were right," Rachel's voice echoed in his mind. "Dangerous and necessary." Outside, a storm rolled across the city, thunder rumbling like the voice of something larger than law itself. For Marcus, it wasn't just about winning. It was about proving that one honest voice could still matter in a world built on compromise. He closed his eyes, letting the storm's rhythm match his breath. The fight was far from over, but for the first time, he wasn't afraid of what came next. Months later, the state introduced the Ellison Act, a judicial reform bill mandating transparency, public accountability, and term limits for judges in high courts. Marcus sat quietly in the back of the assembly hall as the governor signed it into law. No applause, no spotlight, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing the truth had done its work. Rachel found him afterward, smiling softly. "You changed the system," she said. Marcus shook his head. "No. The system changed because people stopped looking away." The cameras flashed, reporters asked questions, but his mind was elsewhere, thinking of all the defendants who never got their second chance, all the voices lost to corruption's silence. His fight wasn't over, it had only evolved. Justice wasn't a courtroom victory. It was a continuous act of courage. As the years passed, Marcus continued his work, mentoring young prosecutors, speaking at universities, and reminding the next generation that truth doesn't need permission to be spoken. When asked if he ever regretted standing up to Judge Gaines, he would simply say, "If silence is safe, then justice is in danger." His story became more than a headline. It became a reminder that one person's courage can outshine an entire institution's corruption. And that's the story of Marcus Ellison, the man who stood against the system and made it blink first. A story of conviction, sacrifice, and the relentless pursuit of truth. Because justice isn't defined by titles or robes, it's defined by conscience. Headphone, if this story inspired you, hit like, subscribe, and share this video. Because somewhere out there, another Marcus is waiting for the courage to stand up. And maybe this story will remind them that truth is always worth the fight.